And so we're going to cover suppliers and customers today.
Okay.
As an X3, let's just start with the navigation and how to get to manage the product information, or excuse me, customer or supplier information. So you have the landing pages on the left screen. I took you to the data administrator landing page under the business processes, and here you can see there's all kinds of things to select from: products, BOMs, costs, etc., etc. So we can go ahead and start with suppliers. So why don't you click on the Manage Suppliers? All right. So, all right, supplier category. Okay. So I would have liked to have seen the category on the screen here, but that's all right. So another way to navigate is through the functional menu on the top. So if you wanted to find that, it would be through Common Data, Business Partners, and Suppliers. Okay. So this is the supplier screen. This is where you'll enter most of your information, and I'll show you how to jump to other areas from here. What's important to remember about suppliers and customers and a lot of things in X3 is there's a hierarchy to things. You usually start with a category. So that's why in your upper left hand of the screen there, under where it says supplier, the first field is category. So the categories define a set of, let's say, defaults that will carry down when you create a new supplier or a new customer. So we'll take a look at the information in that category first. So why don't you go to that category field, and right there, the jump to, go ahead and jump to that, and it's going to jump us to the supplier category function. What I'd like you to do next is it jumped us to that particular category of that supplier record we're on. I'd like you to hit the refresh. There you go. And that'll, on the left list all the categories that are set up. So I see there's already an ingredient supplier category. I'd like to see who created that category. I don't believe I did, or maybe I did. Okay.
I did.
That's
Laura
fine.
had me do all that last week already.
Okay, good. So within here, you got the 4 tabs: the description, commercial, financial, and ranking. I'm going to cover the things that are relevant. There are certain things that aren't relevant due to your business or European or other nationalities that just appear as a default on the screen. But let's just cover the description tab first. So you've got the description. The supplier sequence number field is used if you want to define an automatic sequence counter. That's currently blank here. I assume that you assign your own supplier numbers, if you will. Is that correct?
Yes, I
do. Okay, so
yeah.
that would be left blank. Next in that block is that creation method. If you want to click on that for me, just look at the options there. Okay, the creation method is either direct or with validation. What this means is if you have direct as the creation method, then the supplier is automatically active. If you select with validation, then the supplier is created as inactive, and then somebody has to go in and make it active. So if one or limited people are going to be creating these suppliers, then I would just leave it direct. Underneath that, we have statistical groups. You have statistical groups, and these you'll see throughout the system. You have them for products, you have them for suppliers, you have them for customers. And what these are is these are another set of fields you can use for, let's say, reporting purposes or categorization other than the supplier category. Within here, these statistical groups could denote information such as if you wanted to record them as certain types of suppliers, like approved supplier or not approved. You could use the supplier stat field 1 for, approved as an approved field. You could also use it for like a kind of a subcategory if you want to. It can be used. You can create a list of selections for any of these fields for any kind of characteristic you want to track with the product when it's created. They can also be set up to be a hierarchy or related type of situation to where, depending on what you choose from supplier stat group 1, will determine what you see in 2 and 3, kind of like a multi-level bill of materials almost. So those are what those are for. Those are used a lot in more so in products and customers, but can be used with suppliers. The next block, if you will, the general characteristics. These are just defaults that'll be passed down. Your default country, language, currency, supplier type. There are different supplier types. Normal is typically used most of the time. You want to click on that supplier type field for me. So you could set up a supplier as a prospect, which means that they're not an actual supplier yet, or miscellaneous supplier. Miscellaneous suppliers can be used as like employees for purposes of reimbursements and stuff like that. So your main business partners you're going to do transactional business with will be normal. Under the credit tab or credit block, you have credit control. Now there are 3 options there: check, no check, and hold. What these mean are, by default, it's check, which means if you put an authorized credit limit in here, then it will check the open items versus that credit limit. And it'll just warn you if they're above that, but allow you to complete the transaction and exceed it. If you have no check, then it ignores credit limits. And if you select hold, then that will hold the customer and not allow you to complete any stock transactions. You might be able to enter the order, but you wouldn't be able to receive any product. So that covers everything under this tab of description. Do you have any questions?
Nope.
Okay. The next tab is the commercial tab. Under here you have, under the order block, you have ABC class. This is for cycle counting, free freight, fresh threshold. In certain circumstances, you can offer free freight to customers based on an order amount threshold. You can establish a minimum order. That's the next field to the right. There's a checkbox to whether you allow multi-line orders. Most people do. Next one is acknowledgement reminder. That specifies that when you produce an order, that you send an acknowledgement to the supplier. And same thing with delivery reminders. It just forces you to either print or email the document to the supplier. Next is price list structure. Price list structure. By default, this is blank, but you can set up a price list structure, unique, I think, company by company, in which you can define the characteristics in the pricing other than product pricing. You could have in there other discounts. You can have multiple discounts, or other characteristics you can define in a pricing list structure, and you can have different ones depending on what criteria you want to use. Do you guys think you'll use a purchasing price list structure. Most companies don't, but most companies use that on the sales end.
Yeah, we probably won't.
Okay. Next field is matching tolerance. This just allows a line item to be automatically closed if it's within a certain tolerance, like let's say 3%. So if you place an order for 100, you receive in 97, it'll close that line on the order. Consider it done. Otherwise, left blank, you need to fulfill the entire quantity. The next block below it, reports, order form, receipt note, return slip. These just keep track whether you've printed them or not when you create the transaction. The next block, delivery. You can specify unavailable delivery times, default carriers, default modes of delivery, Incoterms, if those are important, as to who takes possession and when. EU increase, that's European, that can be ignored. You're all domestic. What is important here is due date origin, the next field down. You can either select receipt date or invoice date, what this does is this sets your ticker as to the payment terms. So if you have 30-day terms with the supplier, it'll start the ticker either from the invoice date as you enter it or from the date you received the product. So most people use invoice date, the date that you create the invoice. So for example, let's say you received it last week, but they didn't invoice you till today. If you created the invoice in X3, your supplier invoice today, it would use today's date to start the 30-day terms. So discounts and charges, those require some setup. If you have any discounts that you take in making payments, then those can be set up by default here. Typically, those are handled on not at a category level, but on a supplier by supplier level. In the setup of those terms, I'm not sure if Laura's already covered those in the financials, payment terms and discount terms.
We've done some discount and payment terms.
Yeah, typically you wouldn't use those in the category level. The next is financial tab. Okay, this here, you first, under accounting finance block, you have your accounting code. Standard is pretty much the basic you would use. This defines, your accounting codes define the accounts that the transactions will use in posting. They're called accounting codes. Standard as a default is fine. Account structure, the next field down. What this can be used for is, you have two types of invoices in X3. You have, as with most systems, you can have a miscellaneous invoice, which is directly through the accounting module to where you do not specify a product. You just create an invoice to a supplier or a customer for a dollar amount, and you specify the journal account and a description, and that's your invoice. So within that, you can define what's called an account structure. So if you have repetitive miscellaneous invoices that you create, let's say for rent or utilities or something to where there are multiple lines, you can define an account structure, which basically, if you have an invoice for $100, it'll automatically split the lines into, let's say, $60 to account 6,000 and $40 to an account 6,001. Whatever structure you define here can be passed down to the supplier. And when you do those miscellaneous invoices, it'll use that structure automatically. It can be overridden manually. Then the next field is the tax rule. So have you covered taxing yet?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll leave that for the financial training to go on as, but the tax rules, The way taxing works in X3 is you can define a tax rule at a business partner level. So if you're just doing a miscellaneous invoice and you don't have any products, then that tax rule alone will be used to determine the tax rate. So each tax rule has to have its own tax rate. So if you have multiple tax rates, you have to have multiple tax rules. So you would have one for maybe to start with, whether it's taxable or not. And then from there on, you would have individual tax rules that specify different rates. Now, where this procedure differs is when you have purchase invoices for products. So when you specify a product, that product may or may not be taxable, even though the supplier may be charging tax. They may not be charging tax on certain types of products. So you also have a product tax code in X3, and then you have to define the combination of the supplier or business partner tax rule and tax code together to what's called a tax determination, and that determines if it is taxable and then what the rate is. I think Laura will cover that in financials sometime in the near future. So as far as this goes, on the supplier level, do most of your suppliers charge you taxes, or are you just reselling everything and you don't have taxes?
We don't have taxes.
Okay. So in here, I would select, there should be a tax rule called NTX in there. So if you want to go on that magnifying glass lookup, see if there's NTX right there. So that should keep your purchases non-taxable. Now the next two checkboxes you see there are DOS2. Anytime you see DOS2 in the system, this is a little bit of European flair. That means 1099. So if your supplier is going to be a 1099 type of supplier, this box would be checked. Typically, this wouldn't be checked at a category level. In the 285.1, I forget exactly what it is. It's your 281S. That's European. That's not relevant in our case here. And then below the DOS2, the 1099 form, typically there's a certain form number we use in the US. It is in the selection list. Why don't you select that list for me, the 1099 form? Yeah, so whether it's miscellaneous, yeah, and then the box. So you can select the form and then the box. So if you were to be using it, those are options that you would, again, specify down at the supplier level. Again, these are just defaults that will carry down. Then the amount type, exclude tax, include tax. What this means, you typically want to stick with the exclude tax. X3 gives you the option to kind of back out the tax out of an amount. So if you had include tax selected, and let's say your tax rate was 5%, your total purchase, let's say it was $100. So if you put $100 in, it would back 5 out as tax, and your purchase price is $95. When you have exclude tax, that means you put the dollar amount in, and then it throws the tax on top. And that's typically how most businesses operate. So I would recommend leaving that exclude tax, but that's how that works. Next, you have payment terms below. You can have a default payment term. Net 30 is in there. Payment bank, if there's a payment bank you use that's set up for this supplier or this supplier category, you would select it here, and it can be used as the default. Do you pay all your bills out of one bank account?
Most of the time, yes.
Yeah, so I would select a bank account here. You want to select?
Don't have any bank.
Oh, there's
don't have any set up.
Okay, nothing set up yet. In settlement discount, again, if there's a discount established, that you would always take Typically, you don't have that at a supplier category level. Over to the right, you have analytical. I'm not sure if you've had the discussion about the use of analytical accounting and dimensions in X3, but X3 does use analytical accounting and dimensions. I think you guys have some of these already set up. So here you can, that's good. So here you can just specify a default. So any supplier in this category, when you created a new one, would use the department, and you could specify a value in where it says dimension, where it's blank. You could specify a default value that would just auto-populate. So, any other questions so far?
Nope.
Let me know if I'm going too fast or if you have questions. The next tab, a ranking, I don't think is so useful at this level. There are certain means to rank suppliers in the system. They're calculated, and you can enter factors in here. It's typically not used very often. I would only go into detail here if you really have a need for it. So other than that, I would cancel out of here and let's go back at the supplier level. Now, with all we just said about the category, once they're set up, you should really never have to change them. Most of the times you're going to be copying one supplier to another rather than creating new ones from scratch. It's just easier that way. So here we have the supplier of Cargill. So we can take a look at all the settings here that would have been passed down from the category, and then some settings that are unique. So within our supplier, we have the identity tab, which defines, you see near the top, whether they're active or not, that checkbox of active. Now, that was a setting back at the category level, which we looked at, whether it needs validation or not. That's where that applies, as to whether you create the supplier as active or not. Then you have the supplier code itself, the Cargill, the identity. You can have a short description, which is like an acronym if you want, but there isn't also an acronym field. These are just used in reporting purposes. If you're limited on space and fields, you can have the report use a short description instead of the name 1, for example. So the name 1 and name 2 are basically your two description lines for the supplier. They're 30 characters each, and that's why there's 2. If your supplier was a physical person, then you would check that box. Below that, you see the inner sites block. So in X3, when you are conducting business from one site to another within the same company, or within one site to another amongst different companies, especially in the case of different companies, you can set up the companies and the sites themselves to be business partners so they can trade with each other. And there are a whole set of rules you can set up as to how they do business depending on what accounts you use. You can actually have, you probably have an intercompany account set up. It may be a collective account or not. I think yours is not. But if you have two sites from two different companies doing business with one another, exchanging, selling each other parts, etc., etc., and you don't want to capture that as them as, an independent vendor, then you would make the site itself a supplier. And when you do that, your supplier name would be the same as the site name, and you would select this box Enter Site, and then you would select the site below. So, for example, if you wanted, KC Treats and I forget the other facility name, to be doing business with each other directly and have the accounting basically automated on both sides, meaning, okay, I owe you and you owe me, and all the accounting that goes with it, then you would make that site a supplier and check this inner site box and select the site here. And I believe initially you're not going to be doing that. You'll be treating each other as a vendor, regular vendor supplier, and we can handle the posting properly with the accounting codes. So what you lose in doing that is you don't get the automatic transactions on the other end. Basically, when you do inter-site transactions, when you have the site set up as business partners, for example, if you create a purchase order to the other site, it'll automatically create the sales order. Do you follow me?
Yep.
So whereas if they're just a business partner, there's no sales order on the other end. But you have to have all the accounting set up properly to do those transactions that way. All right. So some other fields you see the country, the language. We kind of went over that. That shouldn't change much from supplier to supplier. And then you have the roles. So the business partner roles here, you see some of them grayed out, some of them active. And you see one checkbox on supplier. So a supplier is a supplier, okay? They can also be a service supplier and a service caller if they were providing services as a business, which I don't think you guys are, so that's not so relevant. The other roles a business partner can be are customers, carriers, sales reps, and prospects. So this kind of jumps us to a little bit of a paradigm shift to define what a supplier is, what a customer is, and what a business partner is. So we started with suppliers because that's a familiar type of term, okay? But all entities in X3, suppliers or customers, they're all considered business partners, okay? So a business partner can be a supplier and a business partner can be a customer. It can be one in the same, and you can even net out your financial transactions within that same business partner. So that's why you see all these other roles unchecked. You see the role of customer is unchecked because the supplier can't be a customer. So let's open up another tab here and let's take a look at the business partners. So where you see that, yep, there you go. So, okay, yep, go into BPs at the top. So when you create a supplier or when you create a customer, it automatically creates a business partner. So in here, you'll see on this list is bigger than the supplier list because you've got suppliers and customers. So let's go up to Cargill again at the top. And you see here that supplier is checked. It's grayed out because you already have suppliers in this category. And again, it looks very, very similar to the actual supplier record itself. Where it's different is click on that BP/company tab. Okay, so here, this is where you can define how different business partners interact with different companies. So you can have, let's say, your supplier Cargill. You can have different tax rules for the customer and supplier for each of your companies in J6. So in J6, you have multiple companies set up. So the business partner can have different rules set up in terms of how they do business with different companies, and here's where you define that. You can have different tax rules, different on the supplier or customer end, payment terms, etc., etc. So if you have a need for that, here's where you define that. And this is like the parent level of the supplier. Now, let's say you wanted to make a customer or supplier also a customer. Go ahead and select the Z-Test BP from the left list for me. Okay. And click on the Identity tab. So right now, Z-Test BP is a customer. Let's make him or her a supplier. In order to do that, we can do it right from the screen. All we have to do is we select supplier. Yep. And this is where it can get a little confusing. Right here, the next step is to select new, and it will auto-populate the information. Select the category as US, and then tab. You see how it automatically filled that in? Keep tabbing through. All right, now if you click on address, commercial, management, any of the other tabs, it should have the values already populated from that BP record. Now on the right-hand side of the screen, click Create for me. Okay, so it says it doesn't have a payment term. All right, or a tax rule. It'll tell you what you're missing. Select NTX again. And there it's satisfied. So close this page. And now you see under roles there, how it's checked now that they're a supplier and a customer. So now we have this Z-Test BP, which you can use for any testing purposes. They can be as a supplier, customer. And that's how that works.
Okay.
All right. So that's about it for the business partner itself. If you want to delete a supplier or customer, you must do it at the business partner level. You cannot just delete a supplier or customer or carrier. You must delete the business partner. Now, if there are transactions in the system using that business partner name, then you cannot delete them. You can only make them inactive. All right. Let's close the page. And I guess let's go back to that other tab we were on, where we were in Supplier Edit. There we go. All right, so next we have addresses. The address tab, that's straightforward. You have an address code. Usually there's a main address. You can have multiple addresses. You can purchase from multiple addresses. You can specify in your purchasing docs where you expect the shipment site to be coming from, what address code. Only one can be a default. Next is the commercial tab. So again, we looked at ABC class in the category, free freight threshold. So everything in that order block we've covered there. Price list structure.
Hey, Dennis.
Yes.
Can I? This is Val. On
Yes.
your entering in an ABC class, to a supplier, wouldn't you rather have your class codes on your items instead of the supplier itself? Like a
Yeah.
supplier could have multiple class items they provide.
Yes, and thank you for reminding that. I misspoke. ABC classes for products are used for cycle counting. For suppliers, they're used for I believe they're used for your rankings. So, yes, that I was incorrect in what I stated there. And as a matter of fact, were you shown how to look up help on certain fields to explain what they mean?
No.
Okay, so let's select that field ABC class. Just click on it for me. Okay, right there. So on your right screen, on the right-hand side of your screen, where you see text, Zoom, inquiries, etc., etc. Okay, scroll down there for me. Now, open up where it says help down there. Scroll down some more. Okay, so here, if you're ever in a function like the supplier function, which we're in, you can click on that function help and it will explain to you everything about this function. Okay, go ahead and click on that. It'll take you to the Sage website. And then you can look through here and get information on all the tabs and all the fields. Okay? Well, go ahead and close this for me. So go back to the supplier screen now. The next one up there is field help. So you were on ABC class. Hopefully it's retained that. Click on field help. Okay. So what the supplier class has to do with the supplier status and the importance of in turnover, for example. Depending on if they have statistical data, they'll be classified differently in terms of the volume of transaction you do with them, etc. So close out of here. So any field you come across that you want to get more information on, that's where you can go to get that. Now, the next tab, management. Under here, we looked at a lot of these type of fields. Again, the credit, check, not check, authorized credit. Here, on a supplier by supplier basis, you would want to set these, typically not on the supplier, but on a customer. Sometimes on the supplier, you don't want to get yourself overextended. You would put a credit limit in. Basically, self-patrolling your credit limit. Now, where you see under authorized credit, there's a credit level total. So you can have a credit, you can have your authorized credit with the supplier as a whole or spread across multiple companies. So if you had multiple companies buying from the supplier, your authorized credit, there's a parameter, and this is set somewhere else. You can have it to where, let's say if your authorized credit were 100,000, it can be total, or it can be 100,000 per company. So you can have a total credit level that was greater than your authorized credit. You can also put them on payment hold. There's a checkbox there. And you can also put a transaction in dispute, which can put it on hold or in a warning status or no disputes allowed. Again, there's matching tolerance, rate type. If you had a customer number, for the supplier, if it were supplier and a customer that was different for some reason, you have a field for it there. You can put in supplier notes, which is in like a rich text format. And then you have these statistical groups, which we covered earlier. So the next tab, Financial. Here you can define, when doing business with this supplier, who the invoicing business partner is, who the paying business partner is. And you can also have a supplier group and a risk business partner. So you could be buying from Cargill, you could be invoicing a different supplier or receiving an invoice from a different supplier. You could be paying yet another supplier, and they could all be part of the same group. You can make a supplier group which groups multiple suppliers together. So, for example, you could have like a parent supplier and subsidiary suppliers, and let's say all the bills go to one supplier. You can make a supplier group and then have the pay to be that supplier group BP name. You also have an accounting code here, as we went through account structure, 1099. That Murano distribution, that's, I think, Portuguese, irrelevant here. In the payment block, you have the payment terms, settlement discounts, tax rules, amount type again, and the analytical dimension if you want to specify a default for this customer. So moving on, you have the ranking tab next. These are where you can rank your vendors, and there's a calculation you can run depending on the business you do with them. You have to establish a history with the supplier, and it can give you ranking factors in those categories, as you see. Next tab is the bank ID. So for a supplier, will you be making ACH payments?
For some suppliers, we will, yes.
Okay. So there's a customization code developed to generate ACH files for you to send to the bank. I think I told Tom I will install that. So the screen will change a little bit once that's installed, but basically here's where you specify the bank name and account number for your ACH transactions. And I'll let you know once we install that.
Okay.
Then you have contacts. Most people don't use contacts here. But one thing to note about contacts, if you do use them, is you establish a contact code. Now, these suppliers all have addresses. Like you have a main address, you can have multiple addresses. Those are unique to the supplier. Here, your contacts, when you put contacts in the system, they're shared everywhere. So just know that, if you go to use a contact code that's the same as a different supplier, you're going to pull in the same contact. Now that covers most of the details on the supplier, but next I want to show you some of the things that you can do on the right list, some information you can jump to from the supplier record that'll be of importance. So on that right list, under text, so here you can specify text that'll appear when you place an order with the supplier. So click on that order form. So this is just text you can enter, and it'll appear every time it'll pop up every time you place an order. Like if you want to give yourself some special notes for the supplier when you place an order, this is where you'd enter that. You can close out of there. Same thing with a return slip. If you process a return, it's just text again. All right. Next, under the Zoom, I'm not even sure what those are. Non-expired draft, extensions, inquiries next. So this is where you would go for this supplier if you wanted to look for any requests for quote lines that are in the system, any order headers or lines, receipts, invoices, returns. It will jump to you. It will jump to a list of those. Not sure if you have any orders in there. Select Fairview Mills as your supplier. I think I placed an order there today. All right, so click under receipts, either header or lines, doesn't matter. Let's click OK on that. I'm not sure what that error is. Something not right. Okay. All right, I will check out that error, but in the meantime, you can see this is a list of receipts for this supplier. So you see the one I did today, receipt 1. And you can actually jump from here into that receipt. If you go to the action card to the left of where it says receipt 1, you can jump right to the receipt if you want. And here's the receipt. So go ahead and close out of here. Okay, we're back to our supplier. So there are a lot of nice things you can jump to for information here. Most importantly, under the accounting. So here you can go and you can look at the BP situation, which will show open items. You can do a risk analysis that'll show all the open, they could be a supplier and a customer. Let's click on all these. I'm not sure that there's any data, but like if you want to show anything that's hit any accounts for this supplier, click on the accounts. Yeah, there's nothing posted, so nothing's going to be here, but you can look at an account by account basis, like expense accounts, whatever, the BP situation. It'll show you the open items, the risks, the last operations. A risk analysis. This just takes you into the second tab of the same screen. So right now you see deliver not invoices under commercial risk there. And last operation, again, is taking you to the same screen, just to a different tab in that screen. So those are pretty useful if you're like searching for things. There's no age balance here yet because I didn't enter an invoice from the supplier. All right, so then below the accounting there, under the actions is the next. So you can create an order directly or an invoice directly from here. If you want to click on open up that selection for me, where it says selection. All right, something here that's useful, not so much in supplier screens, but throughout the system, this advanced selection. What you can do here is kind of neat because you can kind of save a selection criteria. So if there's something you wanted to search by, for example, go ahead and look up in those fields there. All right, so if there's so let's say postcode. Select postal code. It's below your cursor. Keep going down. There. So if you wanted a postcode, I'm not sure what you have in here for addresses, but you could have it equal or not equal to a certain postal code and select memo parameters. Select Memo on the far right. So here you can save this, and you can make it global for everybody to see or not. And create a memo code, just call it zip. Zip. Okay. All right. And select OK. Now, if you refresh your screen for me, I don't think that'll do it. Scroll down on the right to where we can see that advanced again. All right. Go out of this function and back in the function. So scroll to the top, close the window. And we're going to go out of suppliers here. Now we'll go back into suppliers. All right, now on the right, under advanced again. Okay, see how zip is there now? Click on that. Okay, so what this does is this will pull up what you just saved. And because we click that checkbox parameters, it'll pop up, let you change it if you want. Otherwise, just say OK. And then it'll filter that left list of suppliers to anybody with the zip code you entered. And it's telling you there are none. Okay? So you can use this for all kinds of criteria. It's more useful when like searching journal entries or sales orders, anything like that. You can use this search function. It's universal throughout the system. So now let's get our list of suppliers back. All you have to do is go under where it says selection again on the right-hand list and select the all. And that'll bring your full list back. So those are some useful features in the right list. There's one more I'm going to show you under utilities there. Go ahead and open up the utilities. And under utilities, you click properties. This will show you who created and who last modified this business partner. So you see it was created by me on the 9th or the 13th or something like that. So this is where you can go in and say, okay, like if something doesn't look right, you can go and say, oh, that person, you can find out, oh, that person changed this record, and then you know who to contact. And that's throughout the system too. Sales orders, journal entries, anything. And that's about it for suppliers. So let's close out of here. Let's take a look at customers. Customers is almost identical. Again, customers are business partners. And we have one customer in the system, and that's that Z-test customer I was using for testing. So in here, you see the identity again. This is identical to supplier. Everything under there is the same. Same thing, inner sites. You see the inner site block. A customer, you can set up a site to be a customer. And you see the roles. This customer is also a supplier. Let's click on the addresses tab. This should be same again. Commercial tab. Same again, ABC classes. Now here's a little bit different some characteristics here under order, under this commercial tab. So here, you can specify a minimum order, and you can also specify a loan authorized. What a loan is basically you can have consignment inventory to a customer, and you can create a separate, basically a sales order type of loan type. So if this customer is eligible for that, you would select that loan is authorized. So below that to the left, you have one order per delivery, and that's what that means. Each delivery or each order is only one order per delivery. You can also allow partial deliveries, only ship lines complete, or ship orders complete. Again, you have the price amount type, exclude or include tax. And below you can specify a sales rep, commission category, 2 sales reps if you want. Do you guys use sales reps?
Yes.
Okay. Do you pay them commissions?
Yes.
Is that something you care to calculate inside of X3?
Not right now.
Okay. So what I would use this for, most people, because their commission schedules are so unique to each company, we usually do not use a commission category or calculate commissions inside of X3 unless we develop a custom report to present the data as to how you calculate commissions. Other than that, you can select the sales rep. A sales rep will be a business partner that you will set up, and they can just be put on any transaction you want, and can be information. Now, other ways companies use sales rep to capture financial data differently, especially in the journal for P&L reporting, is sometimes we have customers will set up sales reps as dimensions. So just something to consider. All right.
Okay.
Next, we have the invoicing block, freight invoicing, whether it's charged or not, invoicing mode, manual or automatic. We can automatically generate invoices like daily. Invoicing period. You can automatically invoice at increments, I think daily, weekly, monthly. Yep. Specifying invoicing terms when they're automatically generated, I believe. Due date again, same as we talked about, invoice date or shipment date. Move on to the management tab. Again, very similar stuff here. You have more customer relations stuff, management of points and tokens. You can issue points for amounts of business, and you can even like award free products after so many. This is not something that customers use a lot, but it is available. Statistical groups again. Customers, these could be, wholesale customers, retail customers, customers of certain types of products like, whatever your products are divided into, like types as dried or liquids, or those can be statistical groups. Next is your financial tab. Again, here you can have different bill to customer, paid by customer, customer group, accounting code, account structure. Everything in here is very similar to the supplier dimension, default dimension value. Next tab, the ship to customer. You can have multiple ship tos. You can even specify shipment sites, tax rule here. Your customer can have a tax rule. Incoterms, whether the addresses are active or not can be, and you can select a default ship to customer. You can even write in different company names for different addresses. Specify a default shipment site. Do you do any subcontracting to where you send products?
Not very often.
Okay. There is a subcontracting function inside of X3 where it allows you to make a delivery to a subcontractor. Basically it's an inventory move. That will require a separate setup. If you want to do that, send us the information. We'll get it modeled in the system for you. Specify working days. Those are mainly for delivery and planning purposes. Like MRP will use those for like due dates. We'll use Saturday and Sunday. And I think that takes us next to the banking tab. Here again, usually don't have a customer's bank information. So this is typically blank, not used. And contacts. These work the same as supplier contacts. They're all the same. There's only one contacts database. So and again, on the right list, you have very similar functions you can jump to. All the same accounting stuff. And that pretty much covers customers.
Okay.
Any questions? Anything I didn't explain that you'd like more information on?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. I've recorded this session. I'll send the link out, and so you can have it to review. And either myself or Laura can help you with any questions about customers or suppliers. I think I do training tomorrow on products.
Yeah, tomorrow morning.
Product sites. Let me look at the calendar real quick. Yeah, product site setup. So we'll reconvene tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay, bye.